Hey everyone, this is Eric Russo with the Comedy Film Fest. I'm joined today, I'm here with Jeremy Warner from Villains Inc. Hey Jeremy, thanks so much for
Hello.
joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I want to just dive right in. Y'all have a really interesting story for how everything got started. So I guess before we do that, just give us a brief kind of overview of Villains Inc.
Yeah, so Villains Inc. tells a story of three low-level henchmen who, after the death of their villainous boss, they decide to try to take over the world on their own. It's a comedy, and it stars Colin Mochrie, Mallory Everton, and Jason Gray. Um, Colin Mochrie, if any of you are familiar with Whose Line Is It Anyway, the very famous improv show, I'm sure, like many of you, it introduced me to the concept of improv comedy and how everything was made up. But yeah, he's a wonderful person. He's a hero of mine. And then Mallory Everton, who plays the lead Beatrix, and Jason Gray, who plays Kane. They I've known them since 2008, so it was 16 years now. We all met in college, and we were in a sketch comedy troupe called Divine Comedy, and after doing that together, we eventually started a sketch comedy TV show called Studio C, that you can watch on BYU TV or on YouTube. A big following on YouTube. I think the most famous sketch that we did was Scott Sterling. Anytime people get hit in the face by a soccer ball, I see that pop up again. And yeah, and then after Studio C, we started our own company called JK Studios, where we make comedic, for lack of a better word, content. But we've made a few web series. One's called Freelancers. It's about five best friends who are trying to make it in the world as filmmakers, and they have a freelance video production company called Video Production Company. And then we also made a series called Loving Life, which is a satire and parody of kind of lifestyle vloggers. And then we've made a bunch of sketches and stuff like that. We were on actually, this plays into, we were on a show on NBC called Bring the Funny, and that's how I met Joe Beretta, who plays the seagull in Villains Inc. The question was just to talk a little bit about the movie, right? I don't know if I answered that. I think I did.
Yeah, no, it's good because obviously I want to touch on so much of what you're saying, because I kind of I led a little bit. I was like, hey, y'all have a really interesting story. You're diving right into it. I love it. It's but yeah, I mean, in terms of the movie, it's so fun. It also feels like, and this feels, I think, right at home with folks who are familiar with Studio C and everything that y'all did there. Like it both feels something that it feels like anyone can watch and have fun with. I know that's part of like the Studio C is having comedy that's family friendly, but at the same time, and almost like a animated kids movie, like it feels like there are jokes that, like, okay, that one's for the adults, like they're gonna get that, and when the kids get older, like they'll appreciate it as well. It's just like, I think there's also this whole other level of it's firing on so many cylinders. Like it has action, it has special effects, but it's also just so funny. And I think it, gets to y'all's sensibility. So I think, with that, how did y'all arrive at this project? And you gave this backstory. How did you land at Villains?
Yeah. So trying to think. On the note of like watching things and like things for adults and things for a general audience, and the layers of things. When I was a little kid, I really loved Ghostbusters. It's one of my favorite movies still. And it wasn't until I was 15 that I realized it was funny. And I watched it my whole life and I just thought it was cool. And obviously there were things that I like thought were funny, at the time, but like when I was a kid, but like ultimately I just really love this story of, you know, some friends going into business for themselves and kind of like, I mean, I to be honest, like kind of copped a lot of that kind of dynamic and thing for Villains Inc. Not entirely, but like, there's a lot of similarities. The the DNA of my cinephilia, my love of movies, it all stems from Ghostbusters. Um, and so ultimately, what brought us to making Villains Inc. was so uh, in 2018, I directed a commercial for Purple Mattress, the company, but it was for their seat cushion, and we got Colin Mochrie to be in it. And from that, just kind of relationship started there. Later that summer, when the original cast of Studio C had decided to leave the show to try to pursue new things and take that risk. Um, while we were doing that, me, Jason Gray and Matt Moen and I, we had a little company where we make commercials and stuff. So Matt Moen is the co-writer and producer. He also was in Divine Comedy at one point, but not with us. But and he wrote for Studio C as well. And you see him in the movie at the urinals. But we kind of were bouncing around the idea of Villains Inc. And we shot a little like a sizzle, like a scene, and it's quite different from what we ultimately landed on for the movie. But so I guess this is a very, I guess, long story long. So Jason and I had made these commercials for a real estate person who owned a lot of student housing around the country. But we specifically shot some for his housing up in Logan, Utah State University, and we showed that guy the sizzle reel that we made. We're like, we're trying to make a movie, and he came on as the EP and investor on it. So, but so in 2018 we shot that sizzle. We wrote it over the next year, and while Colin was touring and stuff like that, we got together when he came through Utah on one of his tours, and we did a read through of the script and got some feedback and notes and all that jazz, and we showed it to our friends and got feedback and notes and all that, and then we started shooting it in February of 2020, and we got shut down in the middle of March. So, but the crazy thing, that week, so we started shooting, I want to say February 17th. And that weekend before, I think Friday was Valentine's Day, right? And my wife and I had tickets to see this band on Saturday, on February 15th, and they got stuck in Wyoming because of a really bad windstorm, and they didn't show up to Salt Lake. And it was the last, and my wife was pregnant at the time as well. She was like 9 months pregnant. This is just going into how crazy everything was and is, and just the unknown things that happen to you in life. And at that, I want to say that day, the band canceled, and so I was like, oh man, that sucks. And then the very first shoot day we were shooting the scene with Glozell Green, who in the temp agency office. And then I get a text saying like Glozel's car got broken into and somebody stole all her things. And I was like, oh no, how's she gonna get here? But miraculously she got here. And we were able to shoot that. But it was just like this weird, ominous thing, like just preventing everything from happening. And so in the opening funeral scene, if you look at the Bible that the priest is holding, it's got a pentagram on it, and he's just reading actual things from that, from the a satanic Bible. And then all the power in Provo went out right after that, and people were like, "What? Oh no, we're cursed!" And but it turned, somebody hit a power line. They were digging and hit a cable. So don't trifle with the devil, I guess, is a lesson there.
Wow.
But yeah,
that's so wild.
yeah. And then my wife went into labor when we were on set the next week, and so I left, handed over my notebook to my AD, and I was like, just try to shoot this how I would shoot it. I got to go to the hospital, and then I came back the next morning, shot a bunch of things. We reshot some of the stuff from when I was at the hospital, because it's like but and then one day, it was March 15th or whatever. Yeah, I think. I mean, everybody probably knows what day I'm talking about. We're shooting at my sister-in-law's house, and Colin's phone went off, and we called cut, and then the DIT person came up and said Justin Trudeau just shut down the Canadian border, and I just thought to myself, probably not going to finish shooting this movie. And we didn't until February 14th, 2022. So a full 2 years later, we resumed production on it. And it was just so, I was, proceeding with so much caution, and it, just being cautiously optimistic. And I didn't want to celebrate anything until we had finished shooting it, and we finally did. And the weather didn't cooperate, so a lot of the things in the film were supposed to take place outside, but then there was this huge blizzard, and it was like -10 degrees. So when they're at villains tryouts, all that stuff, when Beatrix is standing before the tribunal and stuff, we had to dress all that stuff. That's actually inside of a call center. If you look behind everybody, there's cubicles everywhere. But we brought in a bunch of vehicles, and okay, this is a car bomb. They're learning how to build car bombs in this thing, and we built that giant. Our production designer, Ashley Cook, did an incredible job. She made that giant I don't know what, the psychotic detective board, with all the yarns and stuff like that. She built that giant thing in one day, because that was supposed to be outside. And yeah, we had to build it inside. So, and then that whole location as well was we were scheduled to shoot that stuff the next day after everything shut down, and the location had switched ownership over 2 years. And I went over there with my friend Trey, who plays Captain Justice, because we were just walking around by the train tracks. We walked in, and they made the place look a lot better than it was, and I was like, oh no, they cleaned it, which is fine, it's their business. But then there's this kid just there sweeping, and we're like, hey, who owns this place? And he's like, oh, this person. And so I send this guy a text. I'm like, hey, this is really crazy. I was supposed to shoot here 2 years ago, but you bought the building now, and I can finally shoot it again. And he's like, oh no. And then later on that night, I was bummed, and I was at a jazz game. I was at a Utah Jazz game, and I just get this text back from this guy, and he's like, hey, I used to work in film. What let's talk about this. And like, so this guy was like buddies with Steve Yedlin and Ryan Johnson, and like worked on Brick, and like they were all buddies early on in their careers. And he worked on Touched by an Angel, and he was, you know, very accommodating, and they held off on like putting in their big machinery 1 week for us so that we could shoot in that area. And yeah, there's been, you know, there's a lot of things that fall apart, or, you know, prevent you from doing something, but then there's a lot of, you know, little breaks that you get, and you celebrate the wins, you know. So
Well, I mean, I have to say, and I'm sure that anyone watching this right now would agree. That's not where I thought this story was going. What a wild journey! Congratulations on actually getting through it. I mean,
thank you.
yeah, it's interesting. I won't dive too much into it, but in late January 2020, I started production on a feature that I directed, and it was a very quick, like 2 week production, but we had like 2 outdoor scenes that we were like, let's shoot it in April 2020. And so I know what you went through. We luckily, since they were designed to be outdoors, kind of figured out a way to do it after I think everyone was kind of figuring things out. But to be able to like come around and you know, finish what you started after 2 years is just, I mean, it's an amazing accomplishment, and really congratulations on that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's you know, there were definitely days where I just thought like, oh man, I wish I'd never even started this, because it's just like hanging over you.
Yeah.
It's like living in it's like living in the Kevin's uncle's house in Home Alone 2. I bought this thing to fix it up, and then I just never did anything with it, you know. But that's you know, the only film I can recall that stars a former president that's living.
There you go. Well, we're not including, you know, Reagan and
Reagan,
you know,
yeah,
in
yeah.
this. So you mentioned so many different things that, you know, we could dive into. I want to first kind of say, and I think for anyone who's watching this interview after having seen the film, it, like, the moment that you started talking about Ghostbusters, like, it was not something that I ever would have thought of, but now it's like, oh my gosh, yes, I see that, I get where you're coming. And I mean, even like, there are things about, and I mean this only like, you know, compliments and good things, like there are things about like the Beatrix character that I'm immediate like, oh, that's so like Bill Murray and Ghostbusters. Is that something that you shared with Mallory? Did she know about this kind of connection, or did you just kind of like, y'all got there naturally?
We kind of talked about it briefly. Like I made a list of a bunch of things that we, you know, that I was pulling references from, and you know, talked about different things with different people. Another thing that was a heavy influence on it is Bottle Rocket, and I was like, Mallory, Beatrix is Dignan and Anthony all in one person, you know, and Kane is Bob, you know, yeah, and because he's just doesn't want to be there. Yeah, he's a peacemaker. He, you know, but yeah, we talked about that a lot. Trying to think. Yeah, I know we've definitely talked about Ghostbusters before, but we've worked together for so long that like when you just kind of are friends and have just spent so much time together, and like I've traveled with Mallory more than I've traveled with my own wife, like but when, you know, you just develop a shorthand, and it's kind of like in you know, in Avengers when you know, Hawkeye and Black Widow are like, remember Budapest? You know, yeah, Budapest. Nobody else does, but they just need to remember that, right? It works for them. And then yeah, we talked a lot about, because The Irishman had just come out, and we talked a lot about how I really love the what kind of fish scene in The Irishman. I think it's so funny. It's one of the funniest scenes in any movie that I can think of in the past, 5 years, which is when it came out. But um, I really wanted a lot of like the comedy and the performances to be played straight. A lot of them are pretty big and stuff, but they believe it, right? It's not. I mean, there's a difference between somebody smiling and winking at the camera and somebody like freaking out over something, but because I wanted it to be real to them, I guess is what I'm saying. So
Yeah, I think that absolutely comes across, and I think that it's interesting to talk about these kind of like character dynamics, because I think that, you know, and I think it shows how much time y'all put into the script, into building these characters, because yes, you have elements of like, you know, the straight and absurd with these characters, but I think that there's like a lot more to them, and there's a lot more depth to them. So I absolutely hear where you're coming from on that, and I mean, really, I think that it's just it speaks to the writing, it speaks to the directing, and obviously the performances as well, that all that like comes across, that it doesn't feel like there's any winking. It feels like that this whole world that you establish feels very full and alive. You mentioned a little bit about I believe production, I don't know if it was production designer or somebody in the art department,
yeah,
kind of pulling together that like that wall. I mean, again, like the look of this movie is just, it's so special and unique, you know, especially knowing now that there was a pause for like 2 years in production. How did the rest of the crew feel about this? Did y'all try to look at like the advantages of like, let's, when we come back, like let's come back bigger and better, or was it like let's just pick up right where we left off?
yes and no. I get yes to both of them, I guess. We like a lot of the things that we had yet to shoot were kind of the bigger set pieces and stuff, and so um, I would talk to my DP Wes Johnson and said, these are our IMAX scenes, right? These are the ones that you'd want to be like, yeah, these are the things that are like cool, and you know, big fights, big action, big explosions and things like that. But yeah, it was. Luckily, we had shot like everything inside of like everything when we came back was a unique location, at least, except there's one scene in the film where one shot is 2020 and the reverse shot's 2022, and like it's at the interchange it's when Alex is in the van and they're dropping off their Megadeth gets killed, and the hitman shot is 2022 and everything else is 2020, because of you know, COVID and scheduling conflicts and stuff like that. And if you look really closely, you can probably tell that like just letting it wash over you, I don't think you'd be able to notice, which is a great thing. So that we had to get the same van, we had to get the same truck, and our production designer yeah, again, like they're like, oh, they discontinued that out of this fleet, we've got to find a different one. And I went to go talk to the guy who owned like the, you know, I think it's like Powder Steel Company or whatever, and I went into his office and like, hey, I shot something here 2 years ago, I need to finish it. It's like, yeah, I don't ever want to see you again, you can do whatever you want, I just don't want to see you again. And I was like, okay, thanks, man.
Oh my
He was
gosh.
nice about it. Yeah.
Okay,
But
that's good.
it was like,
There,
don't
it
bother me.
sounds like this became, I'm assuming that y'all shot mostly in the same area, and this is in Utah, is that right?
Yeah, it's in Utah. Well, most of it's shot in Provo, Utah, Provo and Springville, Utah, and some scenes in Salt Lake City. Like the bowling alley is in Salt Lake City. They've got really good wings. I think it's called Bonwood Bowl. Um, And if you look in the background of the bowling alley, um, there was like a senior citizen bowling league there that we couldn't stop. And so there's just a bunch of senior citizens bowling on the complete other side. I think we had 7 lanes and there's like 36 there. And like they were upset that we took those 7 lanes, but it's okay.
Well, this is, I feel like it is, that's such a gift and a curse, because like on the one hand, you're probably like, well, it really like brings the world alive. It really fills everything out. And I'm sure your sound person is just like going crazy at the
Yeah.
balls knocking against the pins in between
Yeah.
all the dialogue and everything.
So we
Um,
had our sound designer who also did our production sound. His name's Brendan, by the way, and he also composed all the music with his writing partner Doug May. Doug came there that day just because it's so chaotic that we just wanted to have tons of microphones, and they, recorded all the microphones. They recorded all the older people playing, bowling, and yeah, if you listen really close, like I don't know if it comes through. Uh, if anybody gets the DVD or Blu-ray, and you can like listen to like one speaker at the end of the film when there's the big shootout at the end, one of the goons, you can hear him yell, "You better not be here to serve my divorce papers." Like you just hear people yelling weird things, little Easter eggs like that. A guiding thing I told Rachel Clark, our hair and makeup person, was I just want everybody besides the main 4 people, I want them to look like they're going through a really terrible divorce. And so everyone's really sweaty. Everyone just looks like they're having just a really bad time, but it's intentional.
that's such an interesting direction for hair and makeup. It's that's so funny. It's so specific. Well, I feel like you mentioned it earlier, and I feel like we got to talk about it. Colin, like, I mean, he's just such a delight in this movie, and I think that, like you said, I grew up with Whose Line Is It Anyway? Watching him, really, and he was just always such a joy and such a pleasure. And then it's like you get so excited, see him pop up here again. It's cool to hear that there had been a working relationship in some kind of ways over the years. So getting him involved, from the start, was he just on board with it? Did y'all, need to do anything, specific? Did you have him in mind when you crafted that character?
We did, yeah. So it was nice to have already kind of talked to him and worked with him before, and just kind of, obviously we know his strengths and everything, but and just to really kind of write to all these people. I think outside of maybe 2 characters in the film, we kind of wrote everybody there with those people in mind. They're to play to their comedic strengths, or play against type. So but yeah, Colin, when we mentioned it to him, he was like, "Oh, that sounds fun. I've always wanted to be in a superhero movie, or a comic book film." And yeah, so we got to do that with him. He's really awesome. um he um yeah, obviously went during COVID. Like we didn't want to we didn't want to be the production that killed him. We didn't want to know, because that's just not good. And obviously we don't want him to die either. We don't want anybody
Oh,
to die.
of course. I can understand, like, one, there's like that, the two goals of, like, we want to keep him alive, but also not be the production that
Yeah.
took him out. It's absolutely understandable.
A very funny thing. So Colin's stunt double, the first week of March, in 2020, he didn't like having to put on a bald cap, and so he shaved his head in that shape. And then and then the pandemic happened, and we didn't get to film those scenes. And so
Did
he just shaved his head preemptively. And yeah, but he came back, 2 years later and just dealt with a bald cap because like, I'm
that's
not going to
hilarious.
shave my head again.
Was he just like, oh, if I shave my head again, there's going to be another pandemic, and it's just going to keep getting pushed down the line?
Yeah,
It's
maybe we get superstitious about all those things, so.
that's wild. That's really wild. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you, and exciting time as well, because lining up kind of perfectly with the fest, y'all are going to be hitting theaters like just shortly after our festival concludes. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, we're releasing in theaters on April 19th. It's a limited release, but so far we're in about 150 theaters and counting. But yeah, you can check out our website, villainsIncmovie.com, to find where it's playing close by you, or share it with people around. Share it with people that you think will like the movie. And yeah, and you can follow us on social media, and you can follow me on Instagram. It's at Warner Jeremy. And yeah, it's exciting. It'll be it's nerve-wracking, it's scary, it's exciting, but all things worth doing there's always that kind of unknown thing when we're trying to do our thing. And you know as long as it like connects with people, with somebody out there. And that's like when I was a little kid, like I said, like I loved Ghostbusters, and like it came to me like as like remember seeing Ghostbusters 2 in the midst of like my parents' divorce, and it just was one of those things that just always made me happy. And I certainly hope that nobody's parents are going through divorce, but I hope that this film can make people happy, like the things that I love have made me happy. So
it's really awesome, and it's a great film. It's a very funny film. It's so fun. It's so fun, and I think that so much of what you're saying, I do think that it'll get through and have that kind of connection there. And here's hoping that it'll be the Ghostbusters for a new generation, regardless of what kids are going through. It's so fun. Again, it's been such a pleasure chatting with you. We're so thrilled to have it at the festival, and we're so thrilled to have had this time with you, Jeremy.
Thank you so much. And thank you for watching, everybody.